Do you enjoy the harvest of Missouri through food, fuel, or fiber? Interested in strengthening your community or making a difference in the lives of others? You're in the right place. This is Stand for Ag with Missouri Farmers Care. Join us for thoughtful conversations around the intersections of farmer, rancher, and consumer interests. Grab a seat, press play, and join the conversation.
Welcome back to this episode of Stand for Ag with Missouri Farmers Care. We're thrilled you've joined us again. We have another hot button topic that we will be talking about, one that impacts broad swaths of Missouri and Missouri's ag, food, and forestry industry, private and public lands. And so we're talking with the three incident commanders, the joint incident commanders across government that are dealing with Missouri's feral hog issue. So feral hogs have been an issue for some time in Missouri, primarily in the southern parts of the state. We're going to deal with that and the reasons why this is important to Missouri. Our timely conversation here on Valentine's Day has been spurred by just a release that the Missouri Feral Hog Elimination Partnership has removed more than 9,800 feral hogs from our landscape over the past year. So I'd like to introduce our guests today, who will be telling us more about this, why it's important, and next steps in this feral hog management effort. So first we have Jensen, one of the incident commanders. He is also with Community and Private Land Conservation with the Department of Conservation, the Missouri Department of Conservation. Welcome, Jason.
Thanks, Ashley. Appreciate the invite.
Yes, we appreciate your partnership. Then we have Travis Guerrant, State Director for Missouri and Iowa for the United States Department of Agriculture, APHIS, the Animal Plant Health Inspection Service, and also an joint incident commander. And Amy Salveter, she is a public service staff officer for Mark Twain National Forest for the U.S. Forest Service. You can see there is a broad breadth of expertise and resources that are being brought by the state and federal government to address these issues. So welcome both Travis and Amy as well.
Thanks for having me.
Yes. So guys, I'm just going to throw out some questions. And, I'm in North Missouri. We talk about that often. This is thankfully so far not been an issue that's been widespread across the state. And I know that's in large part because Missouri is taking an aggressive stance in our management and control of our feral hog population. So tell me a little bit, give us a little scope of why feral hogs are a problem, where feral hogs are a problem, and what our joint incident command that you guys are leading is doing about that problem.
Jason, you want to take that one, or you want me to jump on it?
Yeah, I'll start in anyway, Travis, and feel free to jump in here. So, absolutely. I guess just a little bit of history maybe on feral hogs. The where component of that question. I would say for the most part, feral hogs are confined south of Interstate 44. That's not entirely true, but for the most part, when you look at the state of Missouri, that's where most of the feral hog population is currently located at. We have certainly had populations north of I-44, especially out in what we refer to as Elimination Area 1, which is that area around Truman and Stockton reservoirs. But so for the most part, they're south of I-44. They've really become established since mid to late 90s is when we first started seeing feral hogs show up on the landscape here in Missouri. Feral hogs really started around some of our within a lot of our public land areas in the state. Some of the genetic work that's went into the feral hogs that we've removed has found that we've got 14 genetically different populations of feral hogs in the state. So, when people say, well, these are just pigs that migrated in from Arkansas or from Oklahoma or places like that. That's not the case. That's not to say that there's not pigs that cross the border, because certainly they do. They cross the border from Arkansas and Oklahoma both. But certainly we've got populations that have become established here in Missouri that are unique from other populations as well. And as they spread across the state, they tend to follow our waterways or our watersheds that we refer to those and so they move up and down those watersheds, and then eventually we've seen a lot of those populations that might have been at one time distinctly separate populations that have kind of started to blend together as well in places. So a lot of those populations, like I said, were established on a lot of our public lands, whether it's a Department of Conservation land, Corps of Engineers land, U.S. Forest Service, Mark Twain National Forest lands, places like that. So they really started to become problematic, as we got into the mid 2000s. Governor Holden in 2007 actually established a Feral Hog Task Force that was made up of about 10 different agency heads. Department of Conservation, Department of Ag, Department of Health and Senior Services were involved. And so really the report that was published, or not published, but put together by that group, really identified steps that needed to take place as we move forward if we were really going to combat, control, eliminate feral hogs from Missouri's landscape. Then if you fast forward a few more years to 2016, that group kind of reformed to what we call today the Missouri Feral Hog Elimination Partnership. And along with that partnership came a strategic plan. And so there was actually a plan that was developed, identified 6 different elimination areas throughout the state. Those were all numbered sequentially based on prioritization. So in other words, elimination area 1 that I described out towards Stockton Reservoir, Truman Reservoir, that area was elimination area 1, because that's where we intended to focus first. And so it is kind of our pleasure to report that we do believe that feral hogs have been eliminated from elimination area 1. There hasn't been, we continue to monitor that area. We monitor it with bait sites. We monitor it by staying in touch with all the private landowners that we work with out in that area. We monitor it using things like unmanned aircraft systems or drones to try and detect any additional hogs that might potentially be in that area that we're not aware of. But to our knowledge, as of today, we believe that we have eliminated hogs from that elimination area. And we're making significant progress in a lot of the other areas as well.
And that's not to say, I'm going to jump in there real quick, Jason. That's not to say that there's not a single hog left in elimination area 1, but we don't know about it. So if somebody has any intel or information about spotting feral swine in those areas, please report that to us so we can get out there and take care of those animals. We're that close that we want to make sure that we keep it that way and don't allow a reproducing population to reestablish.
And Travis, just a few numbers for what is the reproduction rate of feral swine? How fast does 2 turn into a sounder of a whole lot of feral hogs?
Well, so they can start reproducing at 6 months of age. So, pretty young age. And then they can have, 6, 8 piglets, something like that. And their survival rates are pretty high, and they can usually have 2 litters a year. So you can do the math on that and see that it doesn't take long for them to really create a big population in an area, in a land, on the landscape. So yeah.
Yes, they have a huge appetite. I've seen damage from feral hogs that is just absolutely mind-blowing. As if you took a rototiller, not that our Ozark landscape supports that sort of damage, right? It's exceptionally destructive to private and public lands. It's exceptionally destructive through and through.
Yeah, and they'll eat about anything that gives them calories, pretty much, that they can get in their mouth. So,
yeah. So from an animal health perspective, this is important to agriculture, right? This is a topic Jason's mentioned that in Europe, feral swine have been brought into the spotlight. And with African swine fever, that is one of many diseases, right? That they can essentially serve as a reservoir for, that could then be spread to our domestic hog population, which works very hard on biosecurity to ensure that they've got the healthiest pigs possible, and which makes it exceptionally important to keep these elimination zones shrinking and fewer feral hogs on the landscape.
Yeah, we agree. And we test for 3 different diseases off of a subset of the hogs that we remove off the landscape. We test for pseudorabies, swine brucellosis, and classic swine fever. And we've actually had feral swine in the past few years show up with pseudorabies and swine brucellosis, but not in a real high proportion, but they have shown up here in the state. So we continue to monitor. We're sampling several hundred of the animals that we remove from the landscape, trying to stratify across the landscape where they exist to get a good sample across snapshot of what's out there. And so we are monitoring for those things. And those are diseases that we want to make sure don't get into the domestic stock. And we want to keep the Missouri pork industry clean of these diseases and away from this stuff. So.
Yep. This would be a unmitigated disaster if Missouri's geography didn't look like it does, right? Where we've got primarily row crop production and swine production north of the Missouri River, and the Ozark Highlands south of the Missouri River, where swine have been established populations to date. This could be, without such effective management, a massive animal health crisis, which is why governors and others have made a real strategic priority over years to make sure that doesn't happen.
Absolutely.
So where are management efforts today? We've talked about around Truman Lake. So I think we're focusing, Amy's on with us. I think we're focusing on the Mark Twain forest area, but that's a big portion of the state, right? Can you hone in on where elimination efforts are and what they look like?
The Mark Twain, as you said, is huge and it spans across southern Missouri. I think we're in 29 counties, if I'm not mistaken. And we have 1.5 million acres of land. Not every single, we're divided into ranger districts. And so that might be something that the listeners of your show might be more familiar with. The Ava Ranger District and the Houston, Rolla, Cedar Creek Ranger. We don't have hogs on every single district, but just about all of them, I would say. And our epicenter of hogs, as we often refer to it, is in Iron and Reynolds County in Missouri. So we have quite a few feral hogs on the Mark Twain and on adjacent public and private lands in those county areas. So that would be for us, for the Mark Twain, that would be like our Fredericktown Ranger District and our Salem and Potosi Ranger Districts. But as I've said, we have them on almost all, I think almost all but one. Am I right about that, guys? We don't have them on the Cedar Creek District, which is up around Columbia and Jefferson City.
Correct.
Everywhere else, unfortunately.
So it's a massive, I was able to come on I was able to just come for 24 hours and have a little insight into what feral hog elimination and management is looking like on the Missouri landscape. I was impressed by the cross-agency collaboration, but tell us a little bit about the amount of man hours and the traps and exactly how these hogs, what it takes to manage and reduce numbers of these hogs across the landscape on your Mark Twain forest areas and just in that central southeast Missouri region.
So
go ahead, Travis.
Yeah, I'll start out talking about. I can talk about the trapping effort and what it takes. So for a lot of our guys, in a high density area where you have a lot of feral swine, you don't have to look super hard to find feral swine. Nowadays, it's getting harder, which is good, right? That's what we want. But what they'll do is they'll find where these hogs are using the landscape, and then they'll establish a bait site. They'll find a site where they can get them on bait. They can drive fence posts into the ground to build the traps and things like that. You can't put a trap on a flint rock and expect to put a T-post into that. It's not going to work. You got to find a place you can get the trap built. And so they'll do that, and they'll get these hogs on bait, and they'll get them accustomed to coming in. They'll put a trail camera on it so they can get tabs on how many hogs are in that sounder. And then when those animals are regularly coming to the bait, they'll go ahead and they'll build a trap, and it's called the Missouri drop trap. It's a trap that the whole trap raises up, and it's got a trigger system. So they'll get that thing set up and get it up there and continue to bait that for 2 or 3 days until those hogs get comfortable, and they're monitoring with their cameras, and they can make sure all those animals are getting under that trap before they go ahead and set the trigger. So once they're in there and they're comfortable and they'll set that trigger, then they're pretty confident within a day or two they're going to have those animals caught. So that can take anywhere from a week to 2 weeks. It just depends on the animal. Some of them are a little more shy about going under the trap. Some of them just charge right in there and it doesn't matter. So it could be anywhere from a week. Generally, Jason, what would you say, about a week or so, week and a half to get them?
Yeah, I mean, I usually say a week and a half. You know, it can be variable, but you know, a week and a half is probably a decent estimate, you know, on the amount of time it would take.
Absolutely. And then as far as effort on some of these other areas where, like, especially on the Mark Twain and some of these big public grounds, we're actually using a systematic approach to baiting, putting a feral swine sounders home range is just a little over a mile. So what we thought is if we put a bait out every mile or so, if there's hogs in that area, we're surely going to get them to hit one of those bait sites. And so that actually does work very well. So we call it fishing. You're putting out bait sites, and then when they hit, then we'll put a camera on there and go through the process of getting those hogs on bait and then building a trap and what we had just talked through. So that's another approach, and that takes a tremendous amount of boot leather to put those baits out on there and then go back and monitor them and then set your cameras up and then go back and check your cameras and that. So on those big open public areas, it can take more time, but that's what it takes to get the job done. So
my mind's reeling with Amy's number of 1 million acres or whatever she just said, and a mile by mile grid system, right? Clearly not over the entirety, but over a significant percentage of that rugged Ozark Highlands public and private ground.
Indeed, and it's not just Mark Twain, it's MDC property and, you know, all the other partner agencies as well. So there's a lot of public ground in that part of the state.
And all the private lands in between.
Indeed.
And even though, I mean, the Mark Twain is the biggest public landowner, I guess, that we work on at about 1.5 million acres. But, you know, if you think about this, Ashley, our trappers covered over, I think, about 3.3 million acres is what they actually covered this last year in 2021. So there's, like Travis said, there's a lot of boot leather involved.
Yes, absolutely. So, you know, focusing in on that area, the management, tell us, the management's changed. Hunting regs have changed. This has been pretty controversial. We come from a hunting heritage up here. It's actually the driving motivation in some of my children's lives, right? It is the thing that they get their schoolwork done and their chores done to head out. Raccoon season ends tomorrow, and that's been a big deal in our house, right? So we fully respect and understand the joy of the hunt. So in this management effort has evolved, I would say, right, that feral hog hunting has been eliminated. Tell me the latest. I may have misstated that. Tell me where what the regulations are on feral hog hunting at this point.
Yeah, so I guess maybe I'll take the lead on this one again, Ashley, and again, just a little bit of history. So, you know, as I described earlier, you know, when feral hogs really got established in Missouri's landscape, a lot of those populations became established around our public lands. And it certainly would appear that those populations were established to, you know, develop, you know, something else to hunt. And so for many years when we were out working, you know, whether it was marking timber, doing an inventory, doing all the many things that our staff do, when we would find fresh sign of feral hogs, we would actually put that on a map. And we had people that were coming into our offices every week that wanted to know where they could go to hunt feral hogs. And so we actually put together a map. We said, here's where we found fresh sign here most recently, and encouraged them to go out and hunt those areas. And, you know, the message at that time was shoot those hogs on site. And so, we tried that. We tried that for a couple decades, and it didn't work. What we saw during that period of time was we saw feral hog populations that continued to increase. we saw new populations pop up throughout the state. And so in 2016, we kind of reevaluated that position and we said, you know what, this isn't working anymore. We need to do something different. And so the Department of Conservation, along with many or most of the Corps engineers projects throughout the state, actually said, we're not going to allow feral hog hunting on these properties anymore. And so that really helped us, especially out there in Elimination Area 1, get in there and be able to work effectively on removing those hogs from the landscape. The Mark Twain National Forest then followed suit December the 7th of 2019, and then the National Park Service, or Ozark National Scenic Riverways, followed suit in April of 2020. So effectively, all of the public land in Missouri is closed to feral hog hunting now. And that has really increased our ability to get in and work on those areas, because the process that Travis described earlier, where a trapper goes out and they identify that hog sign and get bait sites established, I mean, it takes time. And if someone comes in and shoots a hog while they're on that bait site before we get them trapped, all of a sudden that hog is conditioned now that instead of coming back into that bait site, now they think, oh, if I come into that bait site, I'm going to get shot at, or a dog's going to chase me, or something like that. So hogs are the smartest thing in Missouri's landscape. There's no question whatsoever about that. And so, you know, our goal is to try and trap that entire sounder at one time. And we've got some pretty skilled trappers out there that absolutely are doing that right now. Also wanted to talk about private land though. So the hunting ban only applies to public land. It does not apply to private land. Private landowners can do whatever they need to do to remove hogs from their property. We're happy to work with them. You know, we offer trapping services at no cost to them. They can shoot them at night. They can shoot them over bait. They can shoot them year round. They can run them with dogs. They can, you know, have any and every tool that's available to them to help control that problem. You know, one of the misconceptions that's out there too is that if a landowner is using one of these other methods that we won't work with them. And that's not the case either. We're happy to work with that landowner any way possible to control that problem. That doesn't mean that we're going to go out at a time when we know we're not going to be effective. We're not going to compete with other methods. So in other words, if they're allowing hunting, or if they're allowing dogs, we're not going to go out and try and establish bait sites and trap pigs, because we know we can't, that, you know, it's not an efficient use of our trappers' time. So, you know, we're not going to compete during those times, but if it's, you know, the hottest part of the summer, you know, June, July, August, and they don't have dogs hunting on their property at that time, we're happy to come in and try and remove any additional hogs that we can at that time. So we'll work with landowners any way that we can to try and help solve that problem.
I think it's important to note, just to throw in, that we do also allow incidental take of feral hogs during deer and turkey season. So even on public lands, whether that be state or federal public lands, hunters who have a valid hunting license and an unused tag during deer turkey season can take a feral hog, as long as they're following the allowed methods of those seasons.
And that's a really good point, Amy. And that's a compromise that the Department of Conservation actually made, because in 2016, when our conservation areas were closed to feral hog hunting, we didn't allow that incidental take. And then after the Forest Service adopted that incidental take, our commission came back to the Department of Conservation and they said, hey, you know, we think this is a good idea. And so we actually developed a regulation that now allows that incidental take both during both deer and turkey seasons.
That makes a lot of sense to me. That incidental take makes a lot of sense. So I've seen some pretty motivated producers, cattlemen and others, that have a sounder of hogs move in, get grasslands, hay fields torn up. What's the role of our private landowners down there? And what can private landowners do when hogs start moving in or hogs have moved through? What's the best approach?
You want me to take that, Jason?
Yeah, go ahead if you want to take the lead anyway.
Sure. So what we would ask is that you contact us immediately, either via the internet. There's the MDC website, or Jason, do you have that phone number handy? There's a phone number. I don't have it off the top of my head either, but we can provide that to you, Ashley, to contact us, and that will get you in touch with the coordinator in the county that will get a technician out there to help them with getting those hogs off the landscape. So the sooner we can find out about it, the quicker we can get there. Now, when our technicians come out and visit those sites, and it might be that they're not going to trap those hogs right there on the place where they were spotted. They might see that those hogs are using the Mark Twain and the best place to catch them is over there. But they will contact that landowner and let the landowner know that they're targeting those animals over there and when they have success. So we're here to help. They'll come assess the situation, and we'll use whatever tactic is the best approach to get them off the landscape. There we go. There's the number.
Yeah, there you go. You know, and maybe just to add on that a little bit, and Travis kind of hit on this earlier when we were talking about Elimination Area 1, and that, you know, we don't know of any additional hogs in that area, but how important a role that those landowners play, because ultimately we're not going to be successful without the cooperation of private landowners. Even though, you know, we do have a higher proportion of public land in the southern part of the state, and we are doing a lot of work on that public land, it really takes the cooperation of those private landowners for us to really ultimately be successful.
I think that stands across. That's why Missouri Farmers Care and our ag groups stay in close contact with our conservation and natural resource partners. We actually think all conservation stewardship practices aren't effective without the engagement of those that manage and have the stewardship, have the charge of stewardship for the majority of our lands in the state of Missouri, right? That, you know, we highlight our Leopold Conservation Award recipients because they are the hands in which most of our land is entrusted, is our farmers and ranchers and those land managers. So we agree wholeheartedly.
Yeah, and I mean the entire branch that I work in, you know, within the Department of Conservation, that's the reason it was created, you know, was to work specifically with private landowners, because it doesn't matter whether we're talking about, you know, managing deer, turkeys, or eliminating feral hogs. You know, without that cooperation of those private landowners, we're not going to be successful.
Jason, while we're talking about private landowners, do you want to touch on some of the Farm Bill initiatives that we have going to help landowners when they have damage, things like that?
Yeah. So up until a couple years ago, Missouri did not qualify for money that was dedicated towards the control of feral swine in the U.S. However, we had the opportunity here a couple years ago now to actually apply for that funding. And so we were actually awarded 3 project areas in Missouri, which basically covers the entire range of feral hogs in the state. So each one of those project areas is $1.5 million over a 3-year period of time. So $4.5 million total over that 3-year period of time. And so those funds are really targeted towards meeting 2 objectives. One is in regards to equipment, and there's two different components to that equipment. One is making sure that our trappers have good equipment to do their job out in the field. So we've been able to replace some trucks and trailers and UTVs and purchase traps and corn and game cameras and some newer technology and stuff like that than we've had in the past. So making sure that our trappers have the tools that they need to do their job. The other component to that equipment is equipment for private landowners to actually fix damage on their property. And so we're just now in the process of getting some equipment purchased that will be placed in those counties that have feral hogs. If a private landowner has damage on his property, they can come in, borrow that equipment at no cost, take that equipment back to their farm, fix the damage, and then bring that equipment back. So that's something that we've never been able to do before, that is being made possible as a result of these Farm Bill grants. The other component of that, of those farm bill grants, is outreach to landowners. So building relationships at that local level, county level, with individual landowners, as well as like county commissions, county farm bureaus, county cattlemen associations, and stuff like that. And so we actually have 4 positions. We've partnered with the University of Missouri Extension to hire those positions. So they're actually University of Missouri Extension employees, but they're tasked with going out, meeting with county commissions, meeting with county farm bureaus, and then also strategically contacting individual landowners. So especially in these areas where we might be working around large blocks of public land, looking at the landowner base around those areas, looking at who we're currently working with, and then strategically contacting landowners, just to, again, try and build that relationship, try and gain access to those properties so that we can continue to remove hogs from those properties as well.
Those sound like strong tools, important tools that are needed. It's not that Missouri, we didn't cover the broad scope of feral hogs, but it's not that Missouri is alone in dealing with this issue, right? One of 35 states in the United States. After seeing the damage that feral hogs can do, we decided we are hog hunters in our family. We hunt anything that moves. And so we've enjoyed, when I've asked in Florida, in Texas, and Louisiana, like, could we trade deer hunting for hog hunting? Like, are there opportunities there to invite you to Missouri and then take advantage of our superior white-tailed deer population or turkey population? And the last response I got was, oh yes, ma'am, absolutely. There are more hogs here than we can shoot. And, the last time we hunted in Florida, it was on a watershed management. It was owned by a watershed management. It was near the Everglades. And so the land manager, the cattleman's responsibility, his primary responsibility to hold that lease was, you've got to keep feral hog numbers down because of the damage that they do to this watershed and to our fragile ecosystem. So after seeing what can be done in Missouri, we've certainly taken our opportunity to still enjoy hogs, but do that in a place where management priorities have been different and they're not on the cusp of being able to manage those hogs in the way that Missouri is able to do. So with that, the name of your partnership alone is pretty heady, Missouri Feral Hog Elimination Partnership. So tell me, is that, how do you eliminate feral hogs? Is that a goal that Missouri is going to see or be able to maintain?
So you want me to take the lead, Travis?
Yeah, go ahead, Jason.
Okay, all right. So number one, do we believe that elimination is possible? Absolutely, we do. We've made substantial progress already. So one of the ways that we track feral hogs and the progress that we're making, we've got several different tools. But one of the tools that we use is a watershed occupancy map. And so we've been kind of tracking this since 2016. And so from 2016, so the map is actually updated twice per year. And so the map indicates watersheds that are considered occupied by feral hogs, and then watersheds where there used to be hogs and there is no more, where they've been eliminated. And so if you look at the progress that's been made by partnership trappers, since the inception of the partnership, we've actually seen a reduction in watershed occupancy by almost 50%. It's like 48.5% is the exact number, I think. So we've made substantial progress. Does that mean that we can be complacent because we've had some success? No, absolutely not. That just means we put the hammer down until they're gone. But we do believe that elimination is possible. Like I said, we've made substantial progress already, but there is much more work yet to be done.
So to jump in there on when Jason was talking about the watersheds, what that watershed approach allows us to do is to break the state down into small enough parcels. So what we're doing is we're moving strategically between going watershed to watershed and clearing those feral swine. It's kind of like a war. You got to win the little battles to win the war. So we've got our folks on the ground strategically placed so they can handle, they've got a chunk of property or chunk of area that they can handle, and they work feral swine in those areas, and they work in those watersheds until they're eliminated. And, you know, we have folks looking at it from a bigger picture standpoint as well, saying, okay, we need to really put some effort into these watersheds and clear those and eliminate them. And then we can say that those have moved on. And the one thing with feral swine, they're not like other animals, like a lot of wildlife that will quickly fill a vacuum. When you remove them from a watershed, it takes a lot of time for them to figure out that there's not another sounder of competing hogs over there. So you have time. You have time to remove those and then move on to that next watershed and eliminate that next group of hogs. So you're basically building on your success as you go across the landscape. And what helps turbocharge that, we're using trapping as our primary tool, right? But then we also have aerial operations come in where we're removing them. And you mentioned Texas and Florida and some of that, and you might have seen some of that, where you're working out of a helicopter, removing some of these swine. And in these really rugged, tough areas to get traps and equipment into, that can be a really effective tool to really suppress that population very quickly. And then we can clean up with traps and, you know, a UAS with a thermal unit on it to help us, you know, strategically find those animals and then eliminate them off the landscape. It works really well. So we're constantly adapting what tools we use to what the reality on the ground is, and trying new things just to try to be as efficient and effective as we can to get this done.
So one other thing maybe to mention as well, Ashley, you know, you brought up the news release that came out last week. You know, so, you know, it's that news release kind of highlighted kind of the results from 2021. So within calendar year 2021, I think we removed 9,857 hogs from Missouri's landscape. And while that's a big number, you say, well, so what? What's that mean? But you compare that with other years, you know, last year, or the year before rather, 2020, we removed 12,635 pigs from the state's landscape. And if you compare that to the year before, we removed 10,495. So, I mean, we have seen a steady increase in our removals up until this year. And so you say, well, what happened? Were you guys, you know, asleep at the wheel, or what happened? But I would say, you know, we're more efficient and more effective than we've ever been. You know, staff from multiple agencies are integrated onto the same team. We've got, you know, better equipment now than we probably ever have had, and a much more coordinated approach. So if you look at some of the other data that we collect, we killed 3,000 fewer hogs last year, but we covered nearly or over double the amount of real estate that we did the year before. So I think in 2020, our staff actually covered over 1.5 million acres. In 2021, we covered 3.3 million acres. If you look at the number of landowners that we worked with over 700, I think, in 2020. And this last year, we worked with over 1,300. So almost double the number of landowners, over double the number of acres covered, and we killed 3,000 fewer hogs. So are we making progress? Yeah, I think so.
Absolutely. Sounds like we are headed the right way. And from the numbers in this release, it looks like there was, as you said, a real focus in Iron, Wayne, and Reynolds counties. So the net gets smaller and smaller as you're focusing in. Amy, any last thoughts as we wrap this up? What have we not discussed? We'll start with Amy, but we'll go around. Is there any key points that we've missed?
I think you've hit the most important points, but this group of folks that are, you know, on the phone with you right now, I mean, our improved communication and coordination is just essential. At this time, we have only permanent full-time trappers out there on the landscape working to remove feral hogs. In the past, we had kind of an all hands on deck approach. And we've learned just by working together over the last few years that we've got to have full-time people, you know, folks that are dedicated to this year round, and it's their primary job. So I just want to express, you know, gratitude to both, you know, Travis and Jason's agencies, the Conservation Department and USDA Wildlife Services, their full-time feral hog removal technicians are the ones that are actually working on Mark Twain lands right now. Our staff will be there in support as needed, but we have full-time trappers from other agencies working on our lands. And I can't say this has just been very, very rewarding. We learn every day, we improve every week, and we will continue to do so. And it may have been said, but I think it's worth saying again that we do have a lot of public ground to cover, but we always prioritize the needs of Missouri private landowners over anything on public land. So even if there's a lot of feral hogs popping up on Mark Twain lands, any adjacent private landowners will be getting priority over the public land ownership. And then I think that's very important to mention.
Yes, I agree. We work hard in agriculture to protect the profitability and productivity of our private lands across the state, whether that be row crop, grassland, forest lands. All of that is really the focus of why our organizations exist, right? The ability to operate, the freedom to operate, and the ability to enhance those opportunities at home. And so we appreciate that this partnership is part of that, ensuring that the continued productivity of those lands impacted by hogs is protected. So that's a great point, Amy. Travis, anything else we've missed or should cover?
I think we've covered everything pretty well. I guess really my biggest thing I'd like to say is thank you to the landowners that work with us on this. We've said it several times today already that it wouldn't be possible without them. And, you know, I grew up on a beef farm and understand the profit margin with these folks that are trying to make a living off the land. And I also see the damage that these hogs cause. You know, running a boulder through your disc bind is a big deal. You know, that can ruin your whole hay season, you know, and you've got cows that rely on that. And, you know, I understand all that. And for landowners to allow us access to their property as invitees to try to help them and to help the greater good of removing these animals off the landscape, I can't say thank you enough. So really, thank you very much for everyone's cooperation out there.
You know, one of our favorite jokes, Travis, probably outside of agriculture, but that's the circles I inhabit, is, you know, I'm from the government and I'm here to help. And sure. So to overcome that mentality in and of itself, which is sometimes earned and sometimes very unmerited, right?
I get it. I grew up with it.
Exactly. To overcome that, and you're exactly right, to have invitees from several federal agencies is a big step. And so I second you in applauding those that are working for the good of the whole and willing to take on the management and control of those hogs. Yes. Jason, you're in the hot seat. Anything else that we should wrap this conversation with?
Yeah, no, just to second, you know, Travis's comments. You know, again, we can't be successful without the cooperation of those landowners. You know, to allow us to be guests on their property, to help, you know, help with the issue of eliminating feral hogs. Again, we're not going to be successful without their assistance. You know, the one thing that we stress with our trappers is communication with those landowners and the expectation of exceptional service. You know, we're all public servants here on the call, and you know, I'll assure you that there isn't more passionate people than the three of us interested in eliminating hogs from Missouri's landscape. You know, we have talked a lot about trapping, and trapping is one of our primary tools. Travis talked a little about, you know, our aerial operations, you know, and how critical that can be, especially in the wintertime. You know, and in the past, we've only had the helicopter, or had that ability to shoot hogs from a helicopter for 6 weeks out of the year. This year, we've actually got the helicopter all winter long. And so, again, that's because of the power of the partnership. You know, the idea that people see the commitment that we have, the commitment from all public agencies here in getting rid of this problem. So I think that's big as well. We continue to look for opportunities to improve efficiencies and effectiveness with the use of technology. Unmanned aircraft systems is another tool in that toolbox. Using drones to help improve the efficiency of our aerial operations is something that we continue to learn about, I would say, on a daily basis almost. So in other words, utilizing drones to go out and find those sounders of pigs, send the coordinates of those sounders up to the helicopter. So instead of the helicopter searching for pigs, they're flying in, finding that sounder and taking care of that problem. Also using drones for eliminating the last hogs that we know of in certain areas. That's a critical component there. The last sounder of pigs that was removed in Benton County, the drone was a critical piece to finalize that puzzle. So they've been a real valuable asset. Like I said, we continue to learn more every day on how we can potentially take advantage of that technology. Even figuring out ways that we can utilize cellular enabled cameras, even in places where maybe there isn't good cell service. So, just things like that, a variety of different tools that we have in the toolbox, including being able to shoot hogs at night, especially taking care of lone boars that might remain in an area and things like that. So there's a variety of different tools that we use, even though trapping might be kind of the primary one in a lot of cases, but we do have a lot of other tools that are available to us as well.
Listeners, I'm cracking myself up over here thinking about our feral hog elimination partnership efforts being as sexy as the Duttons on Yellowstone, flying from place to place. And so we do talk a lot, jokes aside, we do talk a lot about continuous improvement in agriculture, right? Same harnessing that technology, and we'd be leaving ground uncovered, literally and figuratively, without harnessing that tech that we also fight so very hard to have the right to use in agriculture. And so I think that only makes sense, and see from videos of YouTube and farming across the world and across the nation just how very effective helicopter management can be. There's some really neat videos from New Zealand and Australia of capturing bulls that are kind of rogue bulls that they move with. So that's the other images going through my mind. But I've seen those same helicopters operating on cattle farms in southern Missouri, rounding up sounders and eliminating those from the landscape. And it is an exceptionally effective, from what I've seen, aerial tool to be able to reach into those gnarly Ozark landscapes and reach them. So I think that's a great wrap and a great conversation, just a little insight. Now there's more information that can be found. We'll link in our show notes to the news release that tells some of this data that we've shared today. It also has the website and the phone numbers for producers to be able to call with feral hog damage. That phone number is 573-522-4115, and that is extension 3296. And that is the Department of Conservation feral hog, for private landowners with feral hog damage. That's the right place to reach out as a tool. So we encourage those that have that damage to seek out that, and to seek out those tools that the Farm Bill has provided for restoration and mitigation of that damage. So we appreciate your time. Thank you, Travis, Jason, and Amy. We appreciate your efforts and your partnership with Missouri Ag in protecting our beautiful state of Missouri and our productive capacity and natural resources moving forward. It's been a pleasure to have you.
Thank you.
Ashley.
Thanks very much.
Absolutely. Listeners, thanks for tuning in to this episode of Stand for Ag with Missouri Farmers Care. As always, we're thrilled that you're here. We appreciate your partnership, and stay tuned, as next week we'll be bringing another hot topic and another conversation with a little bit of insight on Missouri agriculture.
Thank you for joining the Stand for Ag podcast with Missouri Farmers Care. We're excited to bring you new stories each week. we as agriculturalists have a lot of stories to tell. Stories of resilience, grit, and stories of families that are united by their passion for agriculture. Each week, tune in for a new episode and join the conversation.